Well, I have a long and varied career, and I won't go into too much of it right here, but I started off to be a classical Western musician, although I always had some interest in American folk music. But I was in a conservatory at the University of Michigan, and I had an epiphany. I think probably my freshman or sophomore year. I had always been raised that music was a universal language. And then it suddenly occurred to me that people who said that meant that Western high art music between the years 1700 and 1900 should be appreciated by everybody, and that the worlds were filled. At that point, because like many people who came up when I did and were classical musicians, we were very focused on being classical musicians. So I didn't know much about rock. I didn't know much about country. I certainly didn't know much about other world musics. And suddenly I realized that I was totally ignorant. So I signed up for a general ethno course, and I loved it. It was with Dr. William Malm, and it was just a world survey of world music, as I remember. And I just decided I needed to go into that field. Well, I have had a very eclectic career. As I say, I started out in conservatory. I have a bachelor's of music in performance. I'm a flutist. But then while I was doing that, I was taking a lot of ethno courses. So I sort of alighted into doing a master's of music in ethnomusicology, also at Michigan. But while I was there, I decided that I was really very interested in American music, American traditional music, and also the intersection between American popular music, 19th century popular music in particular, and traditional music, and also interested in musical instruments. So I started doing internships at museums, and I started to work with the Americanist on campus, who was Richard Crawford. Not an ethnomusicologist, but they were letting me play ethnomusicologist, and I also started taking folklore courses because that was another area that interested me. So they sort of allowed me to skip over and do a second master's of arts in American studies, and then my doctorate was in American studies with an emphasis on American music. But by that point, I already had started a pre-doctoral fellowship at the Smithsonian. And rather than going back, and I left, I think, a week after my comps. And after that, I went first to the Smithsonian to American history, and then for 2 years at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where I wrote on an instrument-related topic for my dissertation. So my PhD is also at Michigan. So I graduated from Michigan 4 times. I was never asked on the basketball team or the football team, but I also, by doing that, I also decided that I wanted to do what's now called public sector ethnomusicology. So I never actually wanted to teach at a university. I stayed in New York City, which is my hometown, and started to get a whole series of increasingly interesting jobs working for museums and arts councils. I was a program officer at the New York Council for the Humanities for many years. I worked for the Brooklyn Arts Council as a borough folklorist for Brooklyn, and also for Staten Island, New York. And I wrote a lot. I did a lot of publications and public lecturing, and for some reason I was always employed. But having a background in ethno certainly helped, because a lot of the jobs I got were music related. And then about 20 years ago, I went back to the Smithsonian to work as a curator for the festival programs. And then about 12 years ago, I was hired away to be the staff folklorist at the Library of Congress. So that's where I am now. They're really all over the map. I think the things that I've been proudest of, there are a couple of major projects that I've done or initiated. I worked with a group of colleagues in New York City in the late 70s and early 80s to start what is now City Lore. It was in the New York City chapter of the New York Folklore Society. We did a couple of major projects, including the first major symposium on culture in the Bronx, that I think might have been the first to do hip hop and graffiti from an academic viewpoint. So, and then it spurred ongoing cultural programming in New York to this day. I also have a major side interest in Celtic music, Irish and Celtic music. I helped found something that is now called the Catskills Irish Arts Week in East Durham, New York, and helped run that for a number of years. I did several major Smithsonian festival programs, including the one I was in charge of, the one on New York City in 2001, which was the first time the Smithsonian had done an urban area. And then I did another one on Scotland and one on Alberta, Canada. But I think the one I'm most proud of curating is one on Northern Ireland in 2007, which had it wasn't just music, it had a huge music component, but it was also on the culture and crafts and industry of Northern Ireland. And I think that had a major impact on some reconciliation that was starting to happen then in the north of Ireland. Right now I'm working on not so much music. I'm doing a major project on occupational folk life at the Library of Congress, the American the Occupational Folklife Project, but it's we've collected almost 1,000 interviews through overseeing teams of researchers through the Archie Green Fellowships that I oversee for the library. We have almost 1,000 interviews with contemporary American workers. First of all, I love music, so music has been a constant touchstone for my life. But I think as I see it, ethno allows me to look at patterns in culture. And that's what a lot of my jobs, if there's a common, and I know it sounds like I'm all over the map, but if there's a common denominator for all the things I've done, I think it's cultural translation and repackaging for hopefully bringing new people in to appreciate other people's lives and cultures. And ethno gave me a wonderful way of listening to people and listening to cultures around me. You know, the highlights of my career, I think, is that having all these positions and doing an awful lot of field work. I've done, not just the music, but I've worked closely with musicians from all cultures, working mostly in New York City. I really have been able to deal with cultures from all over the world, and then doing a lot of field work in Scotland and Ireland and parts of Canada also, has just allowed me to meet amazing people. So I have a network of colleagues in ethno that I dearly love and are very important to me, but equally important are networks of performers from around the world who I feel honored to know and honored to be thought of as someone they could go to for help and assistance and kind of helping sometimes with getting recordings or bookings or visas or things that I can assist with from people who I just feel are the ones who are really carrying on the traditions that I love. I feel that's a small contribution that I can make. I think music is vitally important to a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I think it helps people order their lives and for soundtracks. I think we underestimate how privileged we are to work with something that for most people is a treat and a highlight in their lives. That we have the chance to work with something that other people do perhaps less often than we do, but means as much to them as it means to us.